All right. I would like to bring in the man of the hour, Esteban Carrillo. He is a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. Previously with Tell Us Her English, The Cradle is a great outlet, man. How you doing, man? You doing okay?
Hi, Jamal. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing well. I am doing well. I wanted to go into what is taking place in Lebanon.
Mhm.
Um, there seems to be border skirmishes between the jihadists that are in Syria, that have taken over Syria, and the Lebanese military. Am I understanding it right?
There was, yes, you're right. There were a few days ago. There were a number of injuries among the Lebanese army in the east of the country after these, as you well named them, jihadis, these extremists that are currently in control of Syria. They opened fire on the Lebanese army multiple times. Right, this wasn't by mistake, so to speak. This was a concerted effort. We discussed last week. I think it was last week, Jamal, that these groups, they didn't go to Syria, to be peaceful neighbors, to build a democracy, to
Right.
give rights to everyone. These people, this was not their goal in Syria. Now that they're in power, we're starting to see kind of the reality crop up, despite the best efforts of these former ISIS and Al Qaeda warlords who just got a extreme makeover, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot, right? A tiger cannot change its stripes. So this is what
They
happened.
give a jihadist a glamour shot.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, like they trim their beards, they buy them some nice Armani suits, they teach them how
Yeah.
to walk, how to speak. But at the end of the day, the Syria's new justice minister, right? The country's new
Mm-hmm.
justice minister, over the weekend,
I can't
videos
even.
emerged of
I
him,
can't even show the video of
yeah,
of
overseeing the
the.
public execution of women.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this is, as I said, this is those type of people. So the Lebanese army at this point, it's finds itself in a very difficult position, right? Because on the one hand, in the south of Lebanon, you have the Israeli army still committing violations, still destroying villages,
Right.
entering villages that they couldn't enter during the actual ground invasion because of the presence
Right.
of Hezbollah. Now that Hezbollah has withdrawn and is actually standing by the ceasefire, the Israeli army feels emboldened to violate the terms over 1,000 times at this point, over 1,000 violations since the start. And the Lebanese army has to stand in between, right? They are supposed to be the ones deployed to the south. As the Israeli army withdraws from any given village, any given town, the Lebanese army must enter and take control. They are also often coming under attack by the Israelis. And now they also have to deal with this situation in the east of the country, along the border with Syria. Lebanon is completely surrounded at this point. Lebanon is a seaside nation that all of its borders are either with Israel or with Syria, right? Lebanon has two countries
Right.
bordering it, and it's
But but wait a minute. So the Lebanese. Okay.
mhm,
The thing that always throws me is because there's the Lebanese military and Hezbollah, and these
mhm.
two things are different. The Lebanese
Yes,
military itself is dealing with border skirmishes with the jihadists. The Hezbollah itself has pulled back from various regions
yes.
um, based under the terms of the peace deal. So Hezbollah and the Lebanese military are engaged, but they're engaged with different actors. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I mean the Lebanese army is, well, the armed forces of the nation, right?
Right. But they're
Hezbollah
not
is
fighting Israel at all. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm splitting
I
it.
mean, the thing is, Jamal, that Lebanon is officially, constitutionally at war with Israel, right?
Right.
There's never been any peace treaty. There's never been any normalization. Israel is the enemy, the de facto enemy of the Lebanese state, and has been for decades. And this extends to the Lebanese army, although the Lebanese army itself, at the very least, in the recent decades, hasn't really been much of a force. It's never really been a force, the Lebanese army. Hence, the need for a militia, the need
Right.
for a popular liberation movement, which, regardless of what you think about Hezbollah, this is the purpose that they serve. This is the purpose that they serve originally. This is the reason of their existence, right? This is the same situation with Hamas. If there were no Israel, if there were no military occupation, if there were no crimes against humanity being committed on a systematic and historical basis, you wouldn't need a resistance. You wouldn't need a group to take up arms, right? It's simply it's not compatible. But in any case, that's not the reality that they find themselves in. So now the Lebanese army, it's like I said, it's caught between a rock and a hard place. Truly, it's underfunded, underprepared. It's just very difficult to see the Lebanese army defending Lebanese sovereignty, and that's sadly the state of things in the country, and has been for a very, very long time. And not, Lebanon is a highly corrupt country. It's a highly, highly corrupt country. But the lack of strength that the Lebanese army has, it's by design, right? It's by design. It's all the Western powers and Gulf powers colluding and working together to keep the army, well enough to be fed and paid, I guess, on time, but not enough to actually defend their country, right? Lebanon doesn't have air defense systems. We know that already. Right? We saw the Blitzkrieg campaign that Israel conducted. Lebanon has no air defense systems. If the Lebanese army were to pick up arms, their actual weapons, and start fighting Israel, the United States would flip its lid. The U.S. embassy would all of a sudden just cut all of the aid that the Lebanese army depends on. The Saudis would do the same. Saudi Arabia already, remember just a few years ago, they sanctioned Lebanon because a minister criticized the war in Yemen. Before, way before the genocide in Gaza started, back when Yemen was, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, a Lebanese minister criticized it. Next day, the Saudis sanctioned them. So imagine if the Lebanese army picks up arms against the Israelis. It's not going to go well for them in any.
Prevent it from fighting. Let's talk about Syria for a bit, because I do want to hit Yemen for. Okay,
sure.
Let me partition these. Let's go to Syria first. Turkey has made a point of saying that if it starts to break apart, that they would get involved, meaning, they would get more aggressive in getting involved if they believe it's going to unravel. And this is fascinating to me. I had a gentleman on from Turkey the other day, and he was making this point of saying, Turkish position in this is not all that secure. The reality of it is they have a country that they've overthrown with jihadists of all different types, that now they're going to try to take the weapons away from, which may not want to give those weapons up. Not to mention, you may have all of these different groups that end up going into this kind of civil war that happens again as a response to the jihadists taking over Syria in the first place. Meaning, the Assad government might have fallen, but you have all of these other groups that are there that may not be okay and acquiesce to this kind of religious rule or this kind of caliphate that these guys want to enact in Syria itself. And so they're basically saying this is going to happen on the Turkish border if it does happen, which means that there are going to be a huge number of refugees streaming into Turkey, which is something Turkey doesn't necessarily want. So now Turkey is saying, look, if this starts to fall apart, we're going to get further involved in the country. Do you think he's saying that because he knows that there's a huge potential of it actually falling apart, that HTS doesn't have the capability of keeping Syria together in the way that they are projecting that they're going to be able to?
I feel like in Ankara, just like in Tel Aviv, there's actually the expectation that HTS is not going to be able to hold things together, because more chaos in Syria means more gains for both nations, for Turkey and for Israel. At this point, Israel controls about between 30 to 40% of Syria's water supplies. Their largest dams in the south are currently under Israeli support, because again, these extremists in control of the country, they don't concern themselves with what's happening in the south. They have nothing to say about Israel encroaching in their land, attacking their cities, taking control of their water resources. They are too happy welcoming, all of these Western and Gulf officials that keep going to Syria, right? Just today, there was a delegation from Bahrain. Yesterday, there was a delegation from somewhere else. in the north, Ankara is backing an offensive against the Kurds. Just today, again, drone strikes hitting the city of Kobani, also known as Ain al-Arab, in the north of near the border. And yesterday, Turkish officials said something very interesting. They said, let us take control of the prisons that are holding thousands of ISIS fighters in the north, the prisons that are controlled by the Kurds, who are supported, of course, by the United States. Now the Turkish are saying, let us give the keys to the prison to us. We'll take control of them, right? Which should raise many eyebrows. I think the situation in the north of Syria is really getting lost in the shuffle. You saw what happened, with the attacks, for example, in the U.S., the New Year attacks, right? You saw like these terror attacks. And now you're seeing the incoming national security advisor and really just like this whole like concerted, the military/media apparatus, talking a lot about ISIS again, right? They're talking about the terrorists and ISIS and etc. ISIS is at this point in control of Syria, right? And they are in government in Syria. They're being legitimized. There's thousands of fighters again in these prisons that Turkey is now saying give us control of. So I feel that what's happening in Syria at the end of the day, it's going to become an agent of chaos, and not just of chaos for the Middle East, but global chaos, right? Transnational terrorism. We are entering the war on terror 2.0, right? When this is not longer just going to be confined to any one country, to any one region. This is being spread out. This terrorism is being globalized. And I think my point by bringing up the attacks in the U.S. and the response from officials, it's that it's an attempt to stick it in people's minds, to make sure that they know that, for example, now they're saying that it's Mexico, that the ISIS is coming from Mexico, right? That now that's the excuse. So all of a sudden, if you have a revived ISIS, remember, ISIS was defeated between 2017 and 2019. They were eradicated. They were gone. They were done, except for the groups that remained in the areas under the control of the U.S. government. And again, which are also the control of the U.S. government.
And by the way, we protected Idlib. I mean, like, I remember because they had gotten to the point where Assad, Russia, and Iran had taken back the overwhelming majority of the territory. And the question became up of, okay, well, what about Idlib? And the UN said there are like 30, 40,000 terrorists that are in Idlib. And I remember the US said something to the effect of basically acting as the Air Force for this group of jihadists. It was astonishing. And now you can kind of see why, because they came screaming out of Idlib after setting up their own fiefdom there in order to take over Syria proper. I guess my thing is, okay, so do you think the original objective was, well, yeah, let Jelani take it because ultimately he's not going to be able to hold it, which would allow us to get militarily involved once it falls apart? Meaning there was no expectation that Syria would be able to be held by HTS, that all things being equal, they were never going to allow a terrorist to occupy the government of that state. They assumed that it would fall apart, which would allow them a pretext to get further involved, either from the standpoint of Israel or, for that matter, Turkey. I don't know what Turkey would get out of that falling apart, though, to be honest. I mean, they could take more land, I suppose.
Yeah.
But do they need to if HTS is working on behalf of Istanbul anyway?
Well, first of all, HTS, back when they were called the Nusra Front, or I think even before, when they were still, Al-Qaeda, when they were still honest about their affiliations, they took control of Idlib thanks to U.S. support, thanks to U.S. weapons, right? CIA provided anti-tank weapons, etc. This is how HTS, the now current name of this organization, takes control of Idlib and then holds it thanks to Turkish support. Idlib has a 97% poverty rate. Idlib, under Sharia law since at least 2017. Holding it with an iron grip, but for example, Idlib had electricity, as opposed to the rest of the country, right? The rest of Syria under crushing sanctions. Idlib had electricity thanks to Turkey. Idlib had humanitarian aid shipments from the UN entering via Turkey. Now, these humanitarian aid shipments were being resold by Julani and crew to buy property in Turkey. Again, a tiger does not change its stripes.
Right.
So I think what Turkey wants at the end of the day is territory, right? We talk a lot about Israel being the expansionist state and the idea of greater Israel and everything, but we forget that Turkey, and in particular President Erdogan, they have the same desire. They have the same design. This is a man who has a real longing for the Ottoman Empire. He wants to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. He talks about Aleppo being part of Turkey, of the Ottoman Empire, and probably as far as Damascus. So what's happening in Syria at the end of the day, it's going to be the Balkanization of the country, right? This is, I guess, what the United States really wants. They want the south to be controlled by Israel, which also gives them a new front against Lebanon. They want the north to be controlled by HTS / Turkey, right, as far as possible. And then the east is where the resources, Syria's resources are, right? And the U.S. doesn't want to live there, right? I mean, Turkey is talking about that as well. No, I'm sorry, it's not Turkey. It's Shara. It's the head of HTS.
Right.
He's negotiating with the Kurds, the U.S.-backed Kurds in the east of Syria, to allow them to be part of the government in exchange, for about 80% of oil revenues from these oil fields. So we'll have to see, right? I think I've said it before here in your show that
Wait. Say that one more time. You said they're negotiating. Say that one more time. You said Jelani is negotiating with the Kurds, because I know that they were basically saying, if you don't put your weapons down, you're going to die.
The Kurds
we're going to bury you.
Yeah,
but you said they were trying to make a deal.
That there needs to be unity, and they were willing to become part of a new Syrian army if there are agreements and guarantees and etc. But what Julani is asking is that because the Kurds are in control of Syria's largest oil fields, right? Syria's largest oil fields host U.S. military bases, U.S. occupation troops deployed in all of these fields. But what Shara wants is the profits. He wants the profits from these fields, to reconstruct Syria. Now we know that sanctions are being eased, restrictions are being eased. There's calls, like let's leave the sanctions now that ISIS is in control of Syria. But what Shara wants is the oil, right? And there are discussions ongoing between the Kurdish leaders and HTS. But there's no agreements reached yet. And I think one of the reasons that there's no agreements is because there's a war raging right now in the north of Syria between the allies of HTS, supported by Turkey, and the Kurds, right? These militant groups, these Turkish-backed militants, are trying to take control of the east of Aleppo, approaching these ISIS prisons, and also because they're in the same region, the oil fields, and etc. So we'll have to see. Because Turkey has pledged to eradicate the Kurdish threat in the south of Turkey, right, in the north of Syria. And we know that they mean these groups. They in particularly mean the Syrian Democratic Forces. They don't say it by name, but that's who they mean. That's who they.
The U.S. is also there, though. I mean,
the U.S. is also there, but the U.S. has abandoned the Kurds before. This is not, the first time it would happen. The U.S. has walked away from them many years ago. I feel like at this point, especially with a Donald Trump coming to the White House, and all of a sudden, Donald Trump is he's done a 180, right, from his first term. His first term was America first. Let's bring the troops home. Now his logline is America first, let's take as much land as we can, right? He's talking about Canada. He's talking about Mexico. He's talking about Greenland. He is talking about all hell breaking loose in the Middle East. He's not going to de-escalate, right? He's really not going to de-escalate. And I think, I've said it before, right? The only difference really between Donald Trump and a Democratic candidate, it's the forms, it's the manners, it's the way he says it, right? It's really just about that.
Oh, man, there is a difference. I'm telling you, Trump has a willingness or openness to make a deal. Meaning, if you can make a deal and appease his ego, you will make that deal. You can't do that with Democrats. They just fundamentally believe in war. Like, they literally believe in a forever war. Like, for example, when Donald Trump said something about bringing the troops out of Syria, for example. Okay, well, it was the Democratic Party and, these people affiliated with the military that was against it. when he wanted to make a deal with North Korea. It was the Democratic Party and the military, or at the very least, media space that was against it. Meaning, his own instincts would bring him a willingness or an openness to make a deal in a way that is just not on the table with Democrats. And that's not saying much because they're still pro-war, right? But they're still an aggressive foreign posture. But with Democrats, there is no capacity for it. There is no thought about it. There is no ability to negotiate. And then you get this kind of air of self-righteousness on top of being, pro-militarist. Whereas, Trump is more shameless about it. Yeah, we want to take Greenland. Do you have a right to it? Nope, but they should give it to us anyway. Like, that's honest.
I think, I think you're right. I think you're correct. This is a man that at the end of the day, what he likes is making a deal, right?
Yeah,
this is what drives him, man. And I think that makes him a disruptor, right? In the extent that a person that holds, the highest office in the land, in the U.S. empire, can be a disruptor. But like to bring it back to Syria in particular, I think right now what it's at play here is the gas pipelines. Is the gas pipelines to Europe. This is what the Gulf. This is what Qatar wants. Yeah. This is what Turkey wants as well. So I feel like we're not gonna see an actual government form in Syria, right? I think that the seeds have already been planted by HTS when they said it's going to take 4 years before elections, right? So until then, what, right? And actually, what's more disturbing about this whole situation is that you, for example, have outlets like NPR, right, the National Public Radio, referring to Ahmed al-Shara as the president of Syria. And you forgive me, but when were the last elections in Syria, right? They went from one dictator to the next, and NPR is going out here and saying he's the president. So again, the normalization, not just of ISIS, not just the whitewashing of terrorist warlords, but also the complete disregard for the international law, for convention
at all, for that matter. I mean, he's just effectively stolen a country, and they're calling it. One last thing, Yemen. Before I let you go, I'm fascinated by Yemen. I really am. They have had like a one-man band of defense, or at the very least trying to defend Palestine in the way that they could defend Palestine, and pushing back on Israelis' occupation and just murderous kill spree. And they have done this either through shipping, like basically firing at anything that's going across the Red Sea that's associated with Israel, but also firing missiles that seem to have gotten far more accurate over the course of time that the war has taken place. They said at one point, there are no red lines. Like, this is not a situation where we have red lines. And they apparently pointed out we're not Syria either. Give me your take on Yemen. I mean, their ability to resist in this way is rather astonishing to me. How are they getting this capability to fire off missiles like that? Where are they getting the weapons from? Is this coming from Iran? Is this coming from China, Russia? Where are they getting this kind of technical acumen from in order to launch these missiles?
Well, Yemen is, first of all, as an actor within the resistance axis, Yemen is different than the rest. Yemen is not like Hezbollah. Yemen is not like Hamas or even Syria, in that Yemen had been fighting a war for the past 10 years, an active war, right? Lebanon wasn't, Syria wasn't, not in the way that it was with Yemen, right? Again, I mentioned it. Yemen before Gaza was the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. You were talking about famine, you were talking about cholera, you were talking about almost 500,000 dead. So the Ansar Allah, right, the resistance group that controls the capitals and the main port, and honestly, where 80% of Yemenis live, they have been waging a war for a decade.
Wow.
So when you're seeing their attacks today, their preparations were made under fire. You know what I mean? Their development of their own weaponry came out of necessity. Of course, it has Iranian help, right? As far as we know, it's mainly Iranian blueprints, right? The Iranian gives them the expertise, and then the Yemenis implement it themselves. Because I think it's a bit dishonest, as it tends to be Western media, to talk about Iranian shipments to Yemen when Yemen has been blockaded for the past 10 years, air, sea, and land blockade imposed by Saudi Arabia, supported by NATO. Yemen, its largest land border, it's with it's with Saudi Arabia, right? Then it shares another land border with Oman, which is essentially a neutral nation in this entire crisis that is developing in the region. And then, for as far as the sea goes, if Dan Sarallah controls Hodeida port, right, which is the main port in Yemen. If a ship wants to dock at Hodeida port, it needs to get a clearance from the UN. And even after they get clearance from the UN, for the past decade, these ships were often taken by the Saudi Navy to Jeddah, to a port in Jeddah, where they underwent another inspection before being allowed into Yemen, or simply just being seized and never arriving. So I don't think Yemen is a case of getting weapon shipments, right? Not like Hezbollah, that you had Syria. You had Iraq, Syria, you had a land corridor that went into Lebanon that is being cut off now. Not like Hamas, that also had a way to get weapons through Egypt or through the West Bank via Jordan, etc. Yemen has been they've been developing their own weapons, right? Yemen is not getting missile shipments. These ballistic missiles that are being sent, they are indigenous. They are making them there. And also, maybe because of the way that the Houthis are portrayed, right? Like these sandal-wearing sheep herders who, wouldn't know, I don't know, just the most dehumanizing way that Western media always portrays them, right?
The more sophisticated than that.
Not as an actual government, not as an actual force, not as actual officials, etc., as a military. They have, as you said, Jamal, they have been getting more accurate with every attack. Right now, you see ballistic hypersonic missiles that are landing in Tel Aviv, that are hitting power stations, that are hitting military bases. These are being launched despite the fact that the US and the UK have launched hundreds, maybe even thousands of airstrikes inside Yemen since last January. For a full year, they have been bombing Sana'a and Hodeida. The Israelis also, over recent months have been starting to bomb very heavily these cities. And yet their abilities are not diminished, right? So I think there's a lot more to Yemen that we understand, a lot more to Yemen, right? Maybe it's very likely that over the past decade of war, what they have built is, like in Gaza, underground infrastructure, like in the south of Lebanon as well, underground infrastructure from where they can attack. And I think it is a disadvantage for the US, UK, and Israel that they can only conduct airstrikes. They cannot really go in, right? I mean, because the UK-US campaign is already illegal in both nations, in both Washington and London. This campaign is being conducted without parliamentary or congressional approval. This is the definition of an illegal war, what's happening in Yemen. So they can't all of a sudden, on top of everything, start sending troops right into the land.
Yeah, ground troops would be a hard sell.
Like at this point, we are really reaching a point in which law just is not going to matter anymore anywhere in the world, and it's really just going to be a free-for-all. But in any case, this is why Yemen has been able to maintain its to increase its capabilities as time goes on. We haven't seen a diminishing of Yemen's capabilities, and also there's a drive, right? Yemen, I feel like, has proven that more than anyone else in the Arab world is committed to the to stopping the genocide in Gaza, right? You see these marches every Friday in Sana'a. You're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people. And not just in Sana'a, in other cities as well, that come out marching, with the Palestinian, with the Yemeni, with the Lebanese flag, and they are chanting for escalation. These people aren't marching and saying, let's reach an agreement. Let's have peace. They're saying, let's take the fight to the Zionist enemy. If we need to march, we'll march. If we need to fire more missiles, fire more missiles. If they're going to bomb us, they've been bombing us since 2015, 2014. They've been destroying our country. Yemen, it might be, some people might take it as a bit disingenuous, what I'm going to say, but Yemen doesn't have much to lose, if anything, at this point, right? Besides human lives, Yemen is the Arab world's poorest country. It's already, Ansar Allah is already treated as a terrorist organization at best, if not, like I said, as a bunch of...
Yeah, it's like, what do you have to lose in that situation? No, I understand. I get your point.
They stand on their own.
Esteban, man, thank you for this. I always appreciate your analysis on this stuff. You are damn good at giving this kind of understanding to the audience of what's taking place in this region of the world. Esteban Carrillo. He's a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. Previously, Witella, Sir English, and a damn good friend of the show. Happy New Year, man. Thank you for this.
Happy New Year as well, Jamal. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. I want to go to